because Philips was so kind as to give us a really good pilot, and we did get a really good deal out of that, and we thought we could get a lot more done for that kind of price. But there's so many questions that I have in regards to the motion that we have now on the floor. Number one, there was some discussion about the horizon of the legislation that's in I guess the state legislature. When are they going to vote on something like that? And if they do, how long will it take effect? And if it does take effect, whatever we do tonight, let's say we accept the proposal. I'm sorry, that's more than a couple questions, but if they accept the proposal, whatever we did tonight, will it be nullified, or will we be grandfathered in?
So the bill SB 649, as it's currently in the Assembly, if it were passed in its current form, would allow for the recognition of existing contracts. So any existing contracts that were entered into before the bill took place would be recognized. So some of it depends on when we would come to a contract, whether this would be considered a contract, and when the bill would be active. But I think we would have grounds to say, and this is me venturing perhaps into Rick Doyle's land, so he can stop me. But I think we would be in the position where we had an agreement with NECOM, which would be valid, and the existing legislation does not contemplate breaking existing agreements.
Kip, actually, the existing legislation specifically authorizes you to break existing agreements and get the rate in SB 649.
Oh my gosh, okay, I missed
And
that. Sorry, thank you, John.
it does. It attempts to do that. I mean, there's always the impairments clause in the Constitution, but, you know, those are fights you really don't want to necessarily have. I mean,
John tried to deliver all the bad news today.
So basically, whatever we do here tonight could be absolutely meaningless as far as what revenue streams that we plan to get out of these devices, and potentially put us in jeopardy if we do decide to invest in specific dollar amounts, thinking that we're going to get some kind of return on investment.
Yeah, potentially, depending on what version of the bill finally passes and how it's chosen to be enforced.
And so the other question I had was, when do you think the time at which they will make a decision on this bill? Is it going to be in the next month, 6 months? Is it going to last another year? What are your thoughts about where the process is heading, and how fast is it going to get across the finish line?
It's moving very quickly. It's in this legislative session. They'll be voting before they close the legislative session on this bill, and unless it's continued as a 2-year bill, it's to be enacted on in this legislative session. So,
which ends?
For the budget pieces, it's sooner, and I think, let's see, let me check when we're looking at the vote on this one.
We're in the first year of the 2-year session.
Right.
Yeah.
I can check real quick to see when we're expecting this to come up to vote, and let me answer that in just a moment, if that's okay.
Okay.
I don't think it's scheduled yet to vote in the full assembly.
No, but when we
Yeah.
expect it to come.
Yeah.
Betsy's not in the audience, right? Okay. So I get that in the mayor's memo that we're going to give staff the ability to enter a pilot, but it doesn't really specifically come out and say how big of a pilot, where is it going to be piloted, you know, who's got dibs on the first LED lights, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Perhaps it'd be best for me to answer questions about whatever I put in the memo.
Yeah.
And then, yeah. So what is suggested is a pilot that is between 300 and 1,000 nodes. I think when staff had previously recommended a pilot, I think the 1,000 number was recommended, and some suggestion that a smaller number may be more appropriate. So leave that to staff's discretion to negotiate. The where is also up to the staff's discretion to negotiate. I don't want to bind them about areas where they clearly are going to know far more than I am. What I wanted to do, though, is to set the baseline for our expectations to ensure the city gets a better share of revenues, that the data remains public, that we're not putting cameras in places where there's exposure of private locations in any way. So there's some basic elements there that will confine staff's negotiations, really, as staff in our office had discussed what would be the best way to approach that.
So, and this would be focused mainly on the Anycom project, not necessarily expanding the Phillips project.
At this point, there's one prevailing bidder if the council chooses to accept the prevailing bidder. If not, my understanding is the other choice is reject all bids. So those are our options.
But the option on the table doesn't say reject all bids, and it doesn't say accept the current bidder.
Correct, because I cannot direct in a memorandum before we've even decided an appeal. I cannot prejudge the outcome of that protest or that appeal. And so my memorandum was deliberately vague because we didn't know what was going to happen with the appeal.
I got that. I just didn't. Yeah. But the current motion on the table is equally vague, I think, to me, because it doesn't say accept the.
Let me go back to Councilmember Jones then to clarify. Councilmember Jones, was your motion to incorporate paragraphs 3 and 4 with declaring Anycom and Siemens to be the prevailing bidder?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the motion.
Yeah. So I am. I was actually thinking more along the lines of going back and with a staff recommendation, or at least reviewing bids, as Councilmember Rocha suggested, to go back to the table, because after all, we were trying to get the best deal, right? And I don't know if that we got the best deal. I also had some concerns on privacy issues. I think that it's important for us to define what this technology can do. And besides Anycom, I don't know if you wanted to come up here. I'm sorry to make you stand once again. I know you've been standing for a while. Besides the fact that, and I really love the fact that you could take apart the devices on a camera. And you had told me in private that we could put together cameras for neighborhood streets and cameras that would, but for me, I am more of a person who needs an actual policy in place. And I know that your device actually does more than capture pictures. It captures sound as well, correct?
It has that capability.
Yes. And so you could potentially be recording sounds in neighborhoods even if the cameras were turned off or not existent.
Yeah, so it's up to staff to make that recommendation whether we have these in or not, and what the policy is behind using them. Can we listen for gunshots? Yes or no? So that's a decision they can take. And they're the only ones that have the access to the data. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and that was the second question that I had. So I think staff needs permission from us, I believe, and it's not really staff's that should be making that policy for the city. I think the city council needs to be weighing in on this. This is why I've been asking for a data policy for the last 2 years. And I know it didn't get prioritized, but I am uncomfortable going forward without a data policy in place to know what we're going to do with the sounds generated, to know what we're going to do with the pictures generated, to know how long that we're going to retain data. We have a policy for the cameras on the police officers, but that is a very, very unique policy. If we want to work on that policy, I think it's a good idea. Use it as a backbone. But we don't have one.
Khamis, perhaps if I could clarify a bit, because I think you're making some assumptions about what will be in there. There's no authorization, if this motion's approved, for any video cameras of anything beyond what we are capturing today, which is traffic, which is what Kevin's team does right now in their traffic control center. So there's no authorization for that. And to have that use case included on any kind of longer-term basis, it would have to come back to council, and we would determine exactly what we want to capture and how. We do have an open data platform and a policy that we passed last year. The privacy policy would be necessary if we were to operate things like cameras and audio capacity, which at this point we're not authorizing.
Well, that's interesting because that means you need to manufacture them without the capabilities of collecting sound and voice.
They don't manufacture that. They manufacture a device.
So we take that off. It's done. So that's part of the process.
Okay. So what you're saying is if we go forward with this, what the motion that we have, the devices that will be put on the poles will not have the capabilities of sound collection or video collection? Or will they have them and you just won't turn them on?
Those are all options. So we'll follow any direction, whether we can actually, as you and I talked about previously, Councilmember, we can create 2 SKUs. So we can create one that goes downtown, down in the commercial districts, another one that is used elsewhere. So we're happy to do that.
Okay, yeah, again, this is a policy thing that I think we need to, the mayor has said that they won't have the capabilities, at least from what he just said right now.
Well, I guess what I'm pointing to is item A1D in the memorandum, page 2. No cameras will be deployed on a street pole that capture video of anything other than vehicular traffic until a privacy policy has been vetted publicly and agreed to by council.
Okay, and thank you for including that. And I did read that, and I think it didn't say sound, but it.
We can certainly modify it
Yeah.
if the maker of the motions are willing to do so.
Let's see what else I had on here. So if this motion passes, that means that well, I wanted to know from staff. The staff had recommended, I'm sorry, thank you very much for your staff had recommended to go back out to an RFP. How fast can you get an RFP done? Sometimes RFPs take a long time, and I don't necessarily want this to take forever. You're showing me a slide. Okay.
Yeah, so for the LED RFP, I'm actually going to let Kevin talk about the potential timing for that, and then I'll talk a little bit about the broadband piece.
So our recommendation, if we were to do another LED RFP, specifically for the replacement of our existing lights LED RFP, our plan was to follow the completion of the broadband strategy that would really kind of define what type of streetlight controllers or other IoT things would be useful to us in the controller unit, and then simply put together an RFP for procuring and installing LED streetlights, depending on that broadband strategy, with or without the smart controllers. And that is a very straightforward RFP bid and award type process that we do regularly, that we've done on our other LED installation process. We have specifications, we put those out to bid, there's proposals on them, we review them, and we award. And so you're talking probably, a 6-month period to go through that process of RFP development, review, bid and award.
But you're talking about looking at financing options and the things that you spelled out in your memo.
Yeah, we would need to do that analysis, and is there a financial path to make this pay for itself, and how we would do that? What are the financial tools and mechanisms and funding mechanisms we would use? And assuming there's a path forward to make that work, then proceed with the RFP.
Okay. And so one other thing that I had thought of, a couple other questions to talk to you about DOT, since these are all going on light poles, and now we have a vendor who's putting his controllers on the poles themselves. Who maintains? Will you DOT have the expertise and know-how to maintain those devices?
So it depends on which controller we use. If it's the Anycom controller, they've agreed to maintain their devices. So if their devices aren't working, they would replace or maintain them. They would upgrade them as software, versions are improved. We would maintain the functionality of controlling our streetlights. So we would have an application, regardless of who the controller manufacturer. If it's not Anycom, let me step back. If it's not Anycom, if it's another controller manufacturer, we would own those controllers and maintain them, replace them when they fail. That would probably be the model. We will maintain the responsibility for controlling the streetlights, operating the streetlights, using the controller and any system that the controller brings to us. Typically, it's a computerized, centralized system that controls the device through a networking, networking strategy, whether it's cell or point-to-point or whatever the networking strategy is that's deployed by the controller. Is that?
It covers it. I think, but if we go this route, we're getting 1,000 controllers. What happens to the 43,000 LED lights that we want in our city?
Yeah. So they would remain like that with a basic photocell plugged in on top that turns it on and off like we've always done. They would not be smart lights. We would not be able to remotely control them or monitor their function until such time that they were upgraded to a smart LED. We would still have the existing 24,000 smart LED fixtures we have in the city that we are able to control through this device and a central computer.
I got to tell you, I really love the Anycom technology idea. Right. I'm hesitant in a couple of things. I'm not sure that you can assure me without an actual data policy that we're going to be able to securely monitor our streets and have the lack of and have my confidence in making sure that it won't potentially get hacked and what have you. The other thing that discourages me is that we're not paying attention to the 43,000 other bulbs that we would like replaced. And I don't know how long we'd have to wait to actually get those implemented, because we've actually been waiting for a while. I don't know if the mayor has given thought to allowing Philips to extend more of the pilot as well. Going forward, give Anycom the 1,000, but give Philips some more opportunity to get another, 1,000 themselves, so that we can more quickly replace the LED lights for our city. I know I'm making sausage up here, and I'm not.
I appreciate the point.
Yeah.
Let me first address the concern you raised about hacking and so forth. In terms of the data that's collected, when I say I believe it belongs to the city, I believe it should be the public domain. And at least my understanding is, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, is this is data that we're collecting, for example, around traffic counts. That's data that goes into our open data platform. It's open to everybody. There's no need to hack it because we're providing it to the public. With regard to issues around negotiating with multiple providers, I think that's very, very challenging for staff that's already pretty overwhelmed. And frankly, I'm pretty, I walk into this recommendation tentatively knowing they're already pretty swamped with plenty of projects. So I am perfectly fine if staff determines in the first 30 days of this negotiation this ain't going to work, which is what's provided for in this memo, that, hey, they're not willing to meet the minimum requirements, then staff can certainly negotiate a demonstration project with any bidders, the ones that have proposed or others, and they can do so and bring it to council and move forward. But I think there's a problem if we're having them trying to do multiple things at once, given the fact that we have a very small team on this.
Yeah. Okay, man. I'll reserve the rest of my questions to see if other people had some.
Okay.
So if I could just follow up, two clarifications on the Hueso bill. One, if maybe I could ask my colleague in the back, John.
Yeah, Kip pointed out to me that the bill itself doesn't give any right of termination that's not already in the contract. But once the existing contracts are terminated pursuant to their termination provisions, then the rates would apply. So,
Okay, so current contracts would be protected theoretically.
subject to any termination clauses they have, yeah.
Right. So if there was a termination policy that allowed them to terminate, they could terminate and then they'd be under the new provisions.
Right, okay.
Right. And then in terms of when that will come for a vote, it's unclear. There are a number of committees that it has to pass through in the Assembly, and it'll be based on that. But we're thinking somewhere in the September timeframe is probably kind of the latest that it would get out of those. But really, it's up to the legislature and how long they take. It could pass into a 2-year bill is one of the options. But that's our best guess at the kind of boundaries of the process.
Thanks, Kip. Councilmember Diop, now that we've been around a couple times here, so I'm not sure it's going to get better, but it will get longer.
Well, I'm trying to count the votes here, and it looks like we're going down the AnyCom route here. So I just want to see if the maker of the motion would be willing to fast track a data policy to alleviate some of my concerns so that I can support this, because my main goal here is to have a policy about what we do with the data that we collect. And unless we fast track a policy, I don't know if I could support the underlying motion. The motion that we're about to, your motion.
No, I hear you. Actually, I'm going to reference a statement that Councilmember Rocha made earlier today, and that was about process. And we have a process to evaluate different proposals and ordinance and city policies. And I'd like to respect and follow the established process that we have.
Councilman Khamis, if I could, I think it's important for us to parse out exactly what you want out of the policy. We do have an open data policy that was approved. Are you looking for a privacy policy? Is that the primary concern?
Yes, a privacy policy.
So, and let me just check in with staff. Fair to say that is not yet underway. Is it?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I just want to come back and define
Yes,
the issue.
and quite frankly, I did follow the procedures. Just to be clear, I did put it through priority setting session, and I did follow procedures, and you didn't get enough votes. So here we are. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Jimenez?
Mayor, I promise this is my last.
Sorry, one more quick question.
I don't believe you.
Well, it depends on the answer. Who's going to pay for the rest of the lights? Because that's another concern that I asked for earlier. If we go with this 1,000 project, who's going to pay for the remaining 43,000?
So it depends on how the pilot goes.
Right. And when we know when the pilot is
The
finished?
mayor's memo says a year to conduct the pilot.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So we'll know in a year whether, obviously, there'll be some deployment of lights, presumably with the pilot, and then the remainder will either be paid for through this partnership if we decide to extend it, or we go out with an RFP. Okay. All right, that motion passes.